Welcome to the Top Weirdest YouTube channel. In this video we are going to talk about top 10 strangest murder cases in history. So before starting this video, like this video, and subscribe to Top Weirdest YouTube channel for future updates. Number 10. The Papin sisters, who murdered their bosses in cold blood. In 1926, Leigh and Christine Papin, two French sisters, worked as live-in servants for the Lancelin family in France. According to historic mysteries, they acted strangely, never speaking to anyone but themselves and displaying little interest in anything other than each other. They were efficient in their work and stayed with the family for over 7 years. Mr. Lancelin returned home one night in February 1933 after waiting for his wife at a friend's house to discover her, and their adult daughter dead on the floor in a pool of blood. Their faces had been battered in and their eyes had been gouged out. According to the Vintage News, the Papin sisters were locked in their room, and after hiring a locksmith to open the door, authorities discovered the sisters sleeping on the bed together with a bloodied hammer nearby. The Papin sisters admitted to the crimes right away. Christine grew quite distressed while in prison since she was separated from her sister, and she was eventually granted permission to see Leigh. According to reports, the sisters appeared to be unusually close to one another, with some speculating that they had a sexual relationship, though doctors who examined the Papin sisters refuted this. Christine had a mental collapse a few months later and attempted to gouge out her own eyes. Christine was condemned to life in jail, after their trial for being the mastermind behind the killings, while Leigh was freed from prison in 1943 and found work in a French hotel under a false identity. Her death is thought to have occurred around 1982, however this has never been confirmed. Number 9. Acid bath murderer John George Haigh. John George Haigh was a British serial killer active in the late 40s. He used to dispose of his victims' bodies by burning them in sulfuric acid, according to Forensic magazine. Haigh was convinced he was getting away with murder, literally, because he mistakenly thought that without a body there was no crime. His arrogance is what ultimately got him caught when he led police to the remains of his sixth, and final victim, 69-year-old Olive Durand Deacon. While on trial, Haigh pleaded insanity and insisted to the court that he drank the blood of his victims. He was found guilty in 1949 and hanged a few months later. Number 8. Robert Berdella, the Butcher of Kansas. According to the New York Daily News, Robert Berdella tortured and killed 6 individuals in the late 1980s, sliced their bodies into little pieces, and stuffed their remains inside dog food bags. He also kept meticulous records on each of his victims, which eventually assisted police in proving their deaths. Berdella came close to getting away with everything. He might not have been captured if not for his 7th would-be victim, 22-year-old Christopher Bryson, who managed to escape from Berdella's second-floor apartment. Berdella was initially charged with sexual assault, but after obtaining a search warrant, authorities discovered human remains and other victims' wallets. In 1992, he was condemned to life in prison and died of a heart attack while incarcerated. Number 7. Dennis Nilsen, who murdered young men and kept their bodies. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, Dennis Nilsen terrorized London, killing 15 men over a 5-year span. Nilsen would pick up young men from bars and transport them to his house. He'd strangle or drown them there. According to the International Business Times, he would bathe and dress the bodies once they were dead. He revealed to authorities that he kept the bodies for long periods of time, before disposing of them in order to have sex with them and converse with them. He is currently incarcerated at HMP Full Sutton in Yorkshire, England, where he is serving a life sentence. Number 6. Herb Baumeister, a serial killer who stashed bodies in his backyard. According to People magazine, Herbert Baumeister would bring gay men back to his pool house, strangle them, and dump them in the woods behind his property in the late 1980s and 1990s. Baumeister had mannequins set up in his pool area to make it appear as if they were enjoying a pool party. Eric Baumeister, Baumeister's little son, even came across the bones of one of the victims while playing in the backyard. Baumeister escaped to Ontario, Canada, after realizing the cops were after him, and shot himself in the head at Pinery Provincial Park. He blamed his suicide on his failed marriage and business in his suicide note, but he never admitted to any of the murders. He is thought to have killed between 10 and 20 individuals, according to police estimates. Number 5. Catherine Knight, who tried to feed her husband to his children. In the year 2000, Catherine Knight, an Australian lady, stabbed her partner, John Price, 37 times. Knight then skinned him, decapitated his head, and prepared sections of his body for consumption. She prepared a table for two in the dining room, and served the grilled beef with baked potatoes and vegetables on the side. She placed handwritten letters with the names of Price's children next to each table setting, intending to serve them their father for supper. Knight was found in a comatose state with drugs spilled all over the floor, when police arrived at the house. Price's head was also discovered simmering in a pot of soup on the stove. Knight was the first woman to be sentenced to a life sentence without the possibility of release. She is presently incarcerated at the Silverwater Correctional Complex in New South Wales, Australia, where she is serving her term. Number 4. Jerry Brudos, the shoe fetish slayer. According to the New York Daily News, 4 women in Portland were harassed by Jerry Brudos, a man with a foot fetish, and 4 vanished totally in January 1968. A year later, a fisherman discovered the bones of Linda Sallee, a 22-year-old woman who had vanished the year before. 4 more bodies were discovered by police, and they were all traced back to Brudos. He confessed to the police in graphic detail about the murders. He eventually dropped his first victim in the river, after storing her body for several months in order to dress her up, but not before chopping off a foot to use for trying on heels and taking photos of them. Another horrifying discovery was that he kept souvenirs of his murders, such as shoes, brass, girdles, and even a paperweight made out of human breasts. Number 3. Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. Dennis Rader, also known as the BTK killer, would break into his victims' houses in and around Sedgwick County, Kansas, and stalk them before acting. According to the Wichita Eagle, he would then chain, torment, and kill them, earning him the nickname. Between 1974 and 1991, he killed 10 individuals but wasn't apprehended until 2005. When Rader was captured, authorities searched his home, and discovered images of him with his victims. Rader was charged with 10 counts of first-degree murder, and is currently serving 10 life sentences at Kansas El Dorado Correctional Facility. Number 2. Issei Sagawa, the Japanese cannibal who still walks free. The well-known Japanese cannibal is well known in his homeland. He came from an affluent family, but he'd always craved human flesh. According to Culture Crossfire, Sagawa was arrested for attempted rape at the age of 23. He broke into the Tokyo apartment of a tall German woman and assaulted her. Even though he bit off a chunk of her skin, police didn't know he was intending to consume her. Sagawa, who stands 5 feet tall, later admitted to Vice that he had a crush on taller, Western ladies. Sagawa moved to France to study literature at the age of 32, earning a PhD in the process. Renée Hartevelt, a 25-year-old Dutch lady, was one of his classmates at the time. Sagawa brought Hartevelt over one night in 1981, under the pretense of working on a poetry assignment, but ended up shooting her in the neck, and devouring various portions of her body over the course of 2 days. He tried to dispose of her body's remains in a nearby lake but was apprehended. He spent 2 years in police detention before being found legally insane and sent back to Japan. He was declared sane by psychologists once he arrived in Japan, and he signed himself out of the mental institution where he was being confined. He now lives in Japan as a free man. Number 1. Gertrude Banaszewski, the torture mother. Sylvia Likens, a 16-year-old Indianapolis inhabitant, was discovered emaciated in 1965. According to Indianapolis Monthly, she was covered with cigarette burns, and spread out on a filthy mattress in the house of Gertrude Banaszewski, 37. Because their parents worked as carnival workers and traveled a lot, Sylvia and her sister Jenny stayed with Banaszewski. Banaszewski was paid $20 per week by the kids' father in exchange for lodging his kids. If the money was late and Banaszewski vented her frustrations on the girls, she eventually concentrated her beatings solely on Sylvia. Banaszewski was the mother of 7 children, all of whom resided in the house, and participated in the brutal and sadistic attacks against Sylvia. Children as young as 10 years old were invited to participate or watch. Nothing was reported by anyone. Sylvia was beaten to death in October 1965. Banaszewski allegedly pushed a neighbor to phone the cops and report Sylvia's disappearance. Jenny Likens, Sylvia's younger sister, reportedly murmured to one of the policemen, "Get me out of here and I'll tell you everything," when police arrived at the house. Banaszewski served 20 years in prison before being released, relocating to Iowa, changing her identity, and succumbing to lung cancer in 1990. The rest, who were mostly children, were all given light sentences, if any at all. What do you think of our list? Let us know in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video and want more videos from us again, Be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.